Okay, so I just put a few slides Okay, I think we're going to get started. Thank you very much for joining us. Good morning, everyone. We are here today for the 2018 Chief FOIA Officer Council meeting. It's our second one this year. And welcome to everyone who's here in person or who's watching us via live streaming. I am Alina Simo, Director of the Office of Government Information Services here at the National Archives. Here with me is Melanie Puste, Director of the Office of Information Policy at the Department of Justice, who is co-chair of this council. We have a very full agenda today, although we may let you out early if you behave well. In a minute, you're going to hear from the Archivist of the United States, David Ferriero. Melanie and I will provide a few updates, and then we're going to discuss highlights from the final report and recommendations of the FOIA Advisory Committee and related DOJ guidance that OIP has issued. We have reserved time at the end of today's session to receive public comments. For our web audience, we are monitoring the chat on Livestream, and an OJA staff member will summarize any substantive comments we receive via the chat during the public comment portion of our agenda. Throughout the course of the meeting, we encourage all FOIA professionals watching us on YouTube or here in the audience to ask questions, offer comments, etc. At this time, please help me to welcome Archivist of the United States, David Ferriero.
Thank you, Lena, and welcome to my house. It's nice to have you here, whether this is your first time or returning. And a special welcome to those of you who are joining us via YouTube this morning. I want to thank the co-chairs of the Council, OJA's Director Alina Simo and OIP Director Melanie Puste, along with their staffs for organizing today's meeting. As many of you know, Congress has tasked this Council to do three things: develop recommendations for increasing agency compliance and efficiency, including development and use of common performance measures, disseminate information about agency experiences, ideas, best practices, and innovative approaches, and identify, develop, and coordinate initiatives to increase transparency and compliance with FOIA. That is why this Council serves as the ideal forum for today's discussion on the work of the FOIA Advisory Committee. Earlier this year, the 2016-2018 term of the FOIA Advisory Committee presented me with several recommendations and a robust final report and recommendations, which is available online and I hope you have seen. I have enjoyed reviewing the committee's report and recommendations and working with my staff and Alina to follow up on each of these recommendations. The report includes also an extensive list of best practices identified by the committee, and I encourage all of you to review that list of best practices to see if there are any strategies that may be useful to you to incorporate into your respective FOIA programs or to pick up anything that we may have missed. I look forward to hearing Alina's and Melanie's discussion of the final report and recommendations, parallel efforts by the Department of Justice Office of Information and Policy to develop agency guidance, and the results of the question-answer session scheduled thereafter. And now I turn it over to Alina and Melanie.
Yeah, should I just do this part from here? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm Melanie Pastay, the Director of Office of Information Policy at Department of Justice. First of all, I want to welcome you all to our second Chief FOIA Officer Council meeting of the year. And obviously, given the timing, the first thing on my mind, and I'm sure on all of your minds, is the fact that we got through the fiscal year, the end of the fiscal year. I know we had a massive flurry of activity over up the street at my office, as I'm sure was occurring across the government. So congratulations to everyone for finishing the fiscal year. Obviously, that takes us to right to the point of it's time to start putting together your annual FOIA report to document all those activities. So we at OIP is hosting training on the annual FOIA report next week, next Tuesday. We've also created several new resources to help you with the annual FOIA report. We'll be posting those online probably later today. We've updated the annual report handbook, and then we've also created a new resource, the OIP compliance team, and I have Bobby Talibian here, who's the chief of our compliance team. Maybe you should stand up, Bobby. Yeah,
that's Bobby.
It's Bobby. Probably you all know him very well by now. We've created an at-a-glance resource to help make it easy for you to track through the year your different reporting obligations. Because, of course, once we get through with the annual FOIA report, then it's time for the Chief FOIA Officer report for 2019. And we have issued the guidelines for what should be in that 2019 report. We encourage everyone to look at those guidelines now so that give yourselves time to make sure that you're on track for completing all the activities that we're going to be asking you to report on. And then the last thing I want to do is let you know that we've got our training posted for fiscal year 19. So as part of your efforts to manage your FOIA responsibilities, obviously training is a big part of it, and so our training is also posted. So those are all my updates from OIP.
Do you want to give the date for the training for
the annual report? Yeah. Is next Tuesday. Yeah. At 2 o'clock. It's October 9th from 2 to 4 is the training for the annual FOIA reports next week. And with that, I'll let Alina give you her introductory remarks.
I just have a couple of things that Melanie and I have talked about. First, I'm really happy to announce that we have formed a technology subcommittee. That was the first recommendation to the archivist by the 2016-2018 term of the FOIA Advisory Committee. And we have two volunteers who have stepped up to co-chair. So that's very exciting. Yeah. Melanie and I are excited. Nice. Eric Stein from the State Department and Michael Sarek from Veterans Health Administration. I don't believe either one of them is here, but they might be watching live streaming. We also have several members. I'm just going to announce them. And also, we're totally open to more volunteers. There's still an opportunity to join. So don't be shy, and there's lots of contributions to be made. But Eric and Michael in particular are very excited because they're both undertaking some significant technological advances, I would say, at each of their agencies. So they feel like they have a lot to contribute, as I think will the other members. We have Tammy Hickey from DOD, Cindy Cafaro from the Department of Interior, our former Deputy Director at OJIS, Nikki Gramian from NASA, Monique Cerruti from the American Battle Monuments Commission, Susan Gerson from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and Gorka Garcia-Malin from NIH. So again, if anyone else is interested in joining the band, I am happy to take volunteers, Melanie as well. We believe that there will be a kickoff meeting next month in November, so we'll announce the date as we figure out exactly what day it is, and the State Department has graciously offered to host. So any questions about that? No. Okay. The 2018-2020 term of the FOIA Advisory Committee is underway. The first meeting took place right here in McGowan on September 6, 2018, and Melanie and I were both on the committee. I chair it. I think it's fair to say it was a lively meeting. We had lots of brainstorming, lots of participation from folks, and if you really are burning with desire, you can watch it on YouTube, on our NARA YouTube channel. But all that brainstorming was actually very productive, and we formed 3 subcommittees. And I was just going to announce what they are and keep the co-chair people in mind if you want to reach out to them directly or through me or Melanie, and we're happy to get you in contact. We're looking for ideas and a roadmap, and any and all input is very welcome. So the 3 subcommittees we have formed are, the first is records management, near and dear to the National Archives' heart. The co-chairpersons are our own Jason Barron, our former National Archives colleague, who's now at Drinker, Biddle, and Reith, and Ryan Law, who is the Chief FOIA Officer at Treasury. I don't see Ryan here in the audience, but he is very eager to participate. We have a vision subcommittee with chairpersons Joan Kaminer from EPA and Chris Knox from Deloitte. And then we have a time/volume subcommittee which is going to be led by Emily Creighton from the American Immigration Council and Bradley White from DHS. And we have a number of committee members who have signed up to participate on all 3 subcommittees. So we're very excited about that. Our next meeting of our FOIA Advisory Committee is right here in McGowan again on Thursday, November 29th. And hopefully we'll have some good speakers for you, and we'll have some updates from the subcommittees who are just starting to get their meetings underway and starting to get their act together. I should also just introduce for a minute, because she's also been working extremely hard already, Kirsten Mitchell, who is a designated federal officer for the 2018-2020 term of the FOIA Advisory Committee. Thank you, Kirsten. Please stand up. She deserves a round of applause. She's been working very hard, and thank you. Okay, I think that's all I have. Do we have any questions so far? Okay.
Oh, wait, there is a question.
Oh, great.
Here we are.
I apologize.
Yeah.
I just got the records management subcommittee, the vision. I missed the third one.
Oh, the third one is
Time/volume.
Time/volume.
It doesn't really have a
It doesn't have a catchy name, but the reason we formed it is because there were a lot of concerns among the committee members about the amount of time requesters are waiting, queued up, waiting to get requests, so that's a big concern. And then, of course, from the agency's perspective, the volume of records that they're having to deal with processing. So the committee's going to look at sort of both sides of the equation. So, sure. Thank you for the question. All right, so I'm going to go first.
Yeah.
So we just have, Melanie and I both have a quick PowerPoint we're going to run you through because we do need to keep you awake. So let me just get over here and pull it up.
And we definitely are both happy to accept questions or comments at any time throughout this morning. So just, if we don't see you waving your hand, just yell out, and we're happy to talk with you at any point during the day.
Okay. So my main spiel today is going to be about the best practices part of the FOIA Advisory Committee recommendations from the final report. And one of several ways that our office, OGIS, tries to improve the administration of FOIA is through our work on the FOIA Advisory Committee. And the committee brings together members of the FOIA community from inside and outside of government to collaboratively identify the greatest challenges in the administration of FOIA and develop recommendations for the Archivist of the United States. As of today, the committee has made a total of 8 recommendations to the Archivist and has advanced over 35 best practices. They cover a broad range of topics, including the need for updated fee guidance, we're working on that, improving FOIA search technology, accessibility of records released under FOIA for individuals with disabilities, and expanding the use of FOIA performance standards. So we look forward to working with the Archivist to implement and advance these recommendations. On April 17th, 2018, the committee concluded its work and approved its final report and recommendations. The final report, as the Archivist explained earlier, is available on the OGIS website so please take a look if you haven't already. And the report does include a number of recommendations to improve the administration of FOIA, and I will not cover those unless anyone has any questions. I was going to focus on the best practices part, since one of our responsibilities in OTIS is to promote and inform everyone about that extensive list of practices. So I'm very happy to have that opportunity to do that today. So, So this bucket idea, actually I'm going to give credit to Amy Bennett, our former colleague in OTIS, and also a combination, I think, from Sarah Kotler, who's one of our FOIA Advisory Committee members, who both wanted to approach the best practices in a sort of more bite-sized way, because they can seem pretty overwhelming. So the buckets that we came up with are best practices that can be implemented right away, best practices that can be implemented with some additional work, and best practices that can be implemented in the long term. And I took a shot at putting things into buckets. I don't feel wedded to them at all. These are just suggestions. You may find you disagree with them and you think you can do some of these best practices right away. You may think some of them are completely unachievable in the short term. But just for purposes of trying to organize them, I thought I would just give it a shot. So here we go on the bucket one, best practice, which can be implemented immediately. So management of the FOIA process. We have the importance of working with requesters early in the process. The committee recommended that FOIA offices proactively contact and work with requesters early on when necessary to clarify requests, and provide training for FOIA professionals on their agency's major record-keeping systems. Encouraging teamwork, promoting collaboration among employees to ensure coverage of cases during periods of leave or peak times. I think that might resonate with some of folks in the audience. And form teams with common strengths to handle particular types of requests. Anyone doing that already? Love to see some nods. No nods. Oh, good. I saw a nod. Thank you. 2, bringing in talent. I'm sorry, I skipped over expanded use of tracks. My apologies. Prioritizing requests using separate tracks, which I know everyone is already doing. Otherwise, Melanie will be yelling at you. Simple, complex, and expedited, and assigning resources accordingly. And encouraging simultaneous processing of simple and complex requests. Number 2 is bringing in talent. The one that I identified in this bucket is building a career path that includes creating rotational programs to expose inexperienced or entry-level employees to FOIA. And I think that's a really important one. There are a lot of employees who come into the federal government and think FOIA is a 4-letter word that starts with F, right? And it's not. It's a wonderful profession, and we're very excited about it, so hopefully we can share that excitement with other people. Interns, detailees, and contractors assign interns or temporary staff to complete straightforward, time-consuming tasks, such as data entry. Using technology to improve the process. Designate a point of contact to approve search requests within records management systems. That's very important. And then in the FOIA accessibility category, there were a slew of suggestions there, and I'm really not going to try to read all of them. I'll try to summarize a couple of the key ones that I thought belonged in this immediate bucket that I think can be implemented right away by agencies or are already being implemented right away. So one of the areas of discussion for the committee was the posting of documents on websites, making them 508 compliant. And there was a concern on some of the committee members' parts about the removal of documents which have already been posted on websites, which are not necessarily 508 compliant. So there's a discussion in the report about that. And the committee encouraged agencies to conduct their own undue burden analysis by balancing Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act and their FOIA statutory obligations. And we understand it's sometimes a great burden, and it's 508 compliance has generated a lot of discussion. It generated a lot of discussion during the committee's term. And I think there's probably more work to be done in that area. So I'm hopeful that maybe the Records Management Subcommittee in this next term will take a look. Ensuring that FOIA websites and electronic reading rooms include accessible contact information that individuals with disabilities can use if they are unable to access certain documents. And then make an effort to provide a Section 508 compliant index or catalog of records and a simple and streamlined process for persons with disabilities to request records in an accessible format. So the idea here is if you can't make every single piece of paper, every single document 508 compliant, at least give the opportunity to individuals with disabilities to be able to contact someone at the agency and request a 508 compliant document. So bucket 2, best practices that are more medium term. Again, back to management of the FOIA process, the importance of working early with requesters. This idea was to develop and feature a version of the enterprise data inventories posting on every agency website. I actually had never heard about that before and was educated to learn that this is the first listed objective in Executive Order 13462, which was implemented on May 9th, 2013. Making open and machine readable the new default for government information is the name of it. And according to the website, agencies should already be doing this. So hopefully everyone is doing that. Accountability. Introduce case closures, pages reviewed, and quality requirements as part of the FOIA employees' performance evaluations. And hopefully a lot of agencies are already doing that. And track status of records, requests for records, and ensure visibility of overdue requests, and establish protocols to handle those overdue requests. So this goes to backlog issues, which I know we're all facing. Centralization to the extent possible. So this was actually another area that we discussed because it's not always possible to centralize every FOIA shop in every federal agency. Some agencies do much better with non-centralized versions. I can speak with our own agency, National Archives. We have a decentralized FOIA processing system that I think works, right, Gary? The Chief FOIA Officer agrees. So the committee did encourage agencies to allocate resources for agency technology experts within IT to coordinate and assist FOIA officials with email searches. And I know that's an area that we're going to continue looking at as part of the Records Management Subcommittee. Email searches have definitely become a very big topic. We have gotten a number of OGIS customers who have come to us concerned about email requests that they have with agencies. Centralized processing where appropriate. And again, that could possibly be a bucket 3 that is something you cannot implement medium term. It would have to be long term. And then in bringing in talent, building a career path, creating a career model for information management. That's, again, something that could be medium or short term. Proactive disclosures, and again, there were so many of those, and again, I encourage everyone to read them on the report, but the ones that jumped out at me were post-agency organization charts and a directory listing contact information for all offices. That was actually a hotly contested discussion that we had about putting up on websites individuals' telephone numbers and agencies. The compromise that the committee reached was more general organizational charts and directories listing, main office heads. And lots of other suggestions about publishing proactively calendars of top officials, the top 10 contracts that an agency deals with, task orders and grants, materials that have been declassified to the greatest extent possible, and any material that may have been released to Congress. And then the other area, which you will see in the report is discussed in detail, is the proactive posting and periodic updating of FOIA logs. The committee offered specific and detailed FOIA log recommendations. We actually had a fascinating presentation from Max Galka, who talked to us about how he uses FOIA logs in order to cultivate information and try to make heads and tails of what's going on at every agency. So that's bucket 2. Last but not least is bucket 3, a little bit smaller, but I think these are long-term goals that are attainable, but will probably take a lot of work and, unfortunately, money. Centralization to the extent possible to require functionality that is compatible with FOIA compliance when purchasing future email systems. And that's actually a good one for the technology subcommittee here to look at as well. I think that's it's part and parcel of the issues that we're looking at. Adopting a centralized department-wide FOIA tracking platform or consolidating to fewer tracking systems. Again, not feasible for all agencies, but for some. Where possible, leveraging established off-the-shelf, government off-the-shelf products across organizations. Contracting a developer to create an in-house system and have developers on standby for updates if a COTS or GOTS product does not meet the agency's needs. And regularly explore the application of e-discovery tools and FOIA searches and implement affordable, appropriate options. And I'm confident Jason Barron and his subcommittee will be looking into that. I think that's a very important topic, and we will be following up on that as well. In terms of bringing in talent, contracting surge support staff to increase responses rapidly and aid in routine review. And I put that in the third bucket because I think it's not always easy just to pull a contract together and get contractors on board. There's usually a lot of hoops that you have to jump through in order to get that done, but once you can in your agency FOIA process, it can be very helpful. Records management and search, creating an add-on to IT systems for exporting records. We found there were a lot of issues at agencies in terms of how they're processing records and then exporting them to make them available to requesters. And making the end goal of responding to FOIA requests a major component when developing agencies' records management systems and workflows. And I think, again, that's something we'll be looking at. So that concludes my buckets. Again, if anyone disagrees with them or thinks that they should be different, I'm open to hearing from anyone. And if anyone has any questions or comments, I'm happy to receive them right now. No? Okay, great. So Melanie's now going to come up and talk to you about all the great things that OIP has been doing.
Good morning again. Many of the best practices that were identified during the course of the advisory committee mirror items that are addressed already in OIP guidance. And in fact, many of these areas are ones that we have addressed multiple times with multiple guidance or through multiple activities, including best practices workshops, where some of the people here in the audience have participated and shared their agency best practices. So what I wanted to do was just sort of organize these things into subject matter topics. And let me see if I can flip the slides. Hang on. There we go. So I think it's really four subject matters: good communication with requesters, effective case management, increased proactive disclosures, and enhanced use of technology. And I just wanted to sort of run through briefly some of the things, the guidance that we have, existing guidance on these topics. Of course, our OIP guidance is applicable to all agencies, and it's written in a way that it addresses all agencies, and it's authoritative direction from OIP. So so many of these things are areas that we have been encouraging agencies to do, and then in turn asking agencies to report on their efforts in those spheres in their Chief FOIA Officer reports. So let's first talk about good communication. Obviously, so much of FOIA administration involves making sure that there's a good flow of communication between the requester and the agency. We've had several guidance articles and best practice workshops on good communication. It starts with some of the statutory requirements that we have to assign tracking numbers and give estimated dates of completion to requesters. A big part of making sure that the process flows smoothly with requesters is setting and maintaining expectations. So one of the things we do, for example, when we built FOIA.gov, for each agency on their landing page, we put front and center the average processing times for simple track requests and complex track requests as a way to set expectations with the requester before they even make a request. And then, of course, by law, once a request is made, it's up to the agency to give estimated dates of completion as the request is going through the process. It's just a fundamental part of making sure that the requester knows what's happening with their request and what to expect at the end. We also had our first guidance on good communication talked about how just one of the main things is to make it easy for requesters to be able to narrow the scope of their request. One of the things we heard from requesters is if they have a discussion with an agency and they want to narrow their request, and the agency then says to them, well, now you need to write that down and send us a new request. Well, then the requester might be like, oh, forget it. I'll just stick with my original wording. So we want to flip that and make it simple so that if a requester conveys a narrowing of a request to the agency, it's the agency that can document that, and then the agency passes that information on to the requester. It's some of these tips are simple, but at the same time, any request that you can get narrowed is obviously a win for both the requester and the agency, and so to the extent you can facilitate that from the agency, of course it's a good thing. You also want to have a process in place to make interim releases, because for large volume requests that can take a long time, it's very helpful to a requester to get interim responses along the way whenever it's feasible to do so. And then you might find over time that after a few interim responses, the requester might have all they need in response to that request and be done with the request. So you have multiple times to engage with the requester, and when you send an interim response, it's a nice trigger for more engagement. We had a second guidance article on communicating with requesters, where one of the big things we did was say agencies really need to be communicating electronically with requesters. That should be the default. When a requester gives you an email address in their incoming request, you should use the email address to communicate with them. Now, we know not all agencies can use email, or only certain people can, or there might be firewall issues at the agency. And to address that, our guidance says agencies that have those limitations should put that on their website so that the requester understands why they're not getting an email response. And then, of course, we have some requesters who themselves don't use email. So we have to realize that not everybody likes email or can use email, and so we have to have the ability to communicate non-electronically as well. So we want to use the requester's preferred form of communication. Another thing that we addressed in this guidance article is the importance of giving breakdowns when you give a fee estimate. Sometimes fee estimates can be different or greatly increased amounts of money that a requester might expect. And so if you even just take a few sentences in a response letter to explain why the fee estimate is higher than would be expected, and also to give a breakdown of what part of the fee is attributable to search and what to duplication. Again, that helps a requester understand what's at stake, why they're getting that fee estimate, and then they can work with you more effectively. We just recently issued guidance on the importance of the FOIA Requester Service Centers and FOIA Public Liaisons. These are resources that are required by statute. They were originally established by executive order, and then with the Open Government Act codified these two resources within agencies, and then the most recent FOIA amendments really expanded the roles and the engagement with requesters and the FOIA public liaisons in particular. So we have guidance that explains what those two resources are in the agency and how they are supposed to interact with requesters. In a nutshell, the FOIA Requester Service Center is sort of the front line for contact with requesters, and they need to be able to explain everything about the FOIA process, how the records are organized in the agency, where the requests should be made within the agency, kind of all the front line questions. And then FOIA public liaisons are officials who supervise those requester service centers, and then also have to ensure that there's a service-oriented approach to FOIA. The FOIA public liaisons also have special responsibilities by virtue of the recent FOIA amendments, where they have to be available to explain unusual circumstances and also to explain an agency's denial of a request, because the requesters are individually notified of the availability of the FOIA public liaisons on during those two times in the FOIA process. So this guidance outlines the responsibilities of those resources. Let's just skip through. We've had some best practices on communications, where we've identified things, we've had agency representatives who've identified lots of different best practices, including some simple things like making sure your contact information is up to date so that when people call your agency, they do get a live human being, don't get a disconnected phone, to be proactive in engaging with requesters. That's another aspect of communication that can be helpful. So that's, yes, go ahead, Alina.
From 1 second, I just wanted to mention that some of the feedback we've gotten from folks who've come to OGIS is that some of the agencies' phones are not working, voicemails are full, and they can't get through. So we just want to remind agencies it's really important to check your voicemails every once in a while, clear them, and make sure that someone can actually pick up the phone. I know that really frustrates requesters that they can't get a live human being, and we completely agree that it's really important to be able to talk to a human as opposed to just a voicemail.
Right. And one of the things we did with in building out the national FOIA portal on FOIA.gov was each agency has an account on FOIA.gov where the agency itself can go into the national FOIA portal and update contact information. We did that on purpose to make it really nice and easy for the agencies themselves to make sure that they're presenting up-to-date contact information to the public. Okay, so that's communication, first big aspect of FOIA administration. The second is, of course, effective case management, working inside your agency system to make sure that the process is going well. We've long encouraged multi-track processing of requests. It's actually a provision directly in the FOIA that allows agencies to set up multiple tracks. The whole idea here is that you don't have small or easy to respond requests held up behind massive, huge, complex requests. So the advantages of having multi-track processing are obviously very apparent. It also allows you to offer options to the requester, and by being able to say to a requester, well, if you would narrow your request so that it can fit within our simple track, you can see our average processing time is 16 days for those requests versus our 300-day average processing time for a complex request. You have facts right in front of you that you get right off your annual FOIA report. We've got that now displayed for each agency on the National FOIA portal, and it's a very effective negotiating tool with the requester. So the processing, using multiple processing tracks is something that we've long been encouraging. We've actually also been scoring agencies, as you know, on your ability to process simple track requests within 20 working days. So this is an area where you have an opportunity as an agency to get a nice green score when you really are able to achieve that goal. We've been doing that since 2012. Of course, backlogs, we talked about, the advisory committee was of course interested in backlogs. It's something we're all interested in as agencies as well. We've had guidance on best practices and workshops where we've had agencies highlight things they've done to help manage their backlog, reduce their backlog. It's always a perennial challenge in FOIA administration. We also have a self-assessment toolkit, which is a resource that OIP made available so that agency FOIA offices can themselves go through different aspects of FOIA administration and assess how they're doing, look to see how they're doing, and identifies gaps where there might be areas for improvement. So we think there's lots of opportunities, ever-growing opportunities to help take steps to help manage backlogs. A couple of the highlights that have been consistently shown to help in the area of reducing backlogs and improving timeliness are getting leadership support within your agencies, making sure you have metrics. My friend Michael Marquis, I always think of him when I talk about if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get done. It is such an effective slogan, if you will, and a key part of managing backlogs. Metrics really control, and it goes from assigning metrics to individual FOIA professionals in terms of what they're supposed to do, but also then globally within your organization, looking at your metrics and moving resources around and using the data to help drive your management of FOIA. So metrics are really important. We have got actually lots of really good ideas for managing backlogs, but I'll leave it at that. for now. I can't quite leave it without saying, of course, focusing on your 10 oldest requests. You know, this is something we've been scoring agencies on for a long time. It's a challenge. Several agencies have this as a challenge year after year. And then, of course, the tricky thing with the 10 oldest is that each year, even when you close them, then of course you have a new set of 10 oldest that comes to you. You can't just do it once and be done. But the idea is that if we don't focus on the 10 oldest each year, we're going to then continue to have a situation where really old requests, and I always say an old request is not like wine. It does not get better with time. We know that old request is there because there is something or many things that are really, really problematic and tricky about it. And so we really felt like having a goal of closing your 10 oldest each year is a driver and a way to get agencies to say, well, regardless of how hard it is, we're going to do it. So certainly I'll take this opportunity right now as we're starting fiscal year 19 to make sure that everybody identifies your 10 oldest that you're going to have for this fiscal year and go ahead and get those assigned, get them looked at, and make a plan so that you when you think of it now, you have a whole year to close those 10. So if you think of it now is the best time, the most optimistic time that you'll have to close those 10 oldest. So I encourage you to make sure that you have a separate plan in place to do that. Okay. I mentioned the toolkit as a resource for you all to help with your case management. Our sort of third bucket, or not quite bucket, but our third category of focus, our third focus area, of course, is increased proactive disclosures. Everybody likes proactive disclosures. It's the one thing, ever since the DOJ FOIA guidelines came out, the one thing that I felt like agencies have responded to with the most enthusiasm and with the most success is proactive disclosures, because we all like proactive disclosures. We like to be able to put things up on our website. We like to be able to tell requesters, look, this stuff is already posted. And of course, the public is happy when they can just find things without having to make a request. So everybody loves proactive disclosures. We've got lots and lots of examples every year in agency chief FOIA officers. So some really incredible things people are doing, not just posting information, but creating new apps and interactive websites. There's lots of really nice and interesting things that agencies are doing to make information proactively available. We've got guidance on making proactive disclosures. Of course, one of the key things that we all have to be focused on is the codification of the rule of 3. So when you have records that have been requested under the FOIA 3 times, they're now required by law, by the FOIA amendments, to be posted. So that's one thing, of course, I want to make sure I highlight with agencies. We ask agencies always to talk to us about and include in their chief FOIA officer reports, what are you doing, what are your systems, what are your processes to identify those records that have been requested 3 or more times, because we do want to make sure that we're posting those. The idea behind posting records that have been requested 3 or more times, of course, is that once you get to the point of having 3 requesters, that's your indication that there's more broad interest in those records, and we should satisfy that interest by posting them. You can go much, much further than waiting till 3. You can certainly post after 1 request. We encourage agencies to post even before a request. When you know you have records on a topic that are going to be of interest to the public, then they should all be posted. And all of that needs to be done in an open format so it's searchable as well. We've got checklists on that. I'll skip through these slides. You can always look at them and look directly at our guidance on proactive disclosures. We've had best practices workshops on proactive disclosures as well. And then our last topical area, of course, is increased use of IT. We're never going to tackle FOIA, especially with all the increase in the number of FOIA requests. We're never going to get a handle on it without using technology. So we've been sort of like proactive disclosures. People really like IT. Obviously, agencies embrace IT. They want to use IT. It's just that it's much more difficult. There's costs involved. There's many more hurdles to go through to actually be able to utilize technology. But it's a focus of the DOJ FOIA guidelines, and it's certainly been something we've been asking agencies to report on. Now, we established a FOIA IT working group back in 2010, and we've had a lot of work and engagement with agencies about using technology. At DOJ, we actually, now it seems sort of quaint, we actually did a pilot program where we tested the difference between using deduplication and e-discovery tools and compared that with the old hand manual FOIA processing. I say it seems quaint now because it's so obvious, I think, to all of us now that, of course, using digital tools to deduplicate and process, of course, it's faster and saves money and saves time. But several years ago, when e-discovery was new, we needed to make the case to show that it was effective for FOIA administration, so we actually did a pilot on it. And of course, it dramatically increases the efficiency of FOIA processing. We all, I think, now our interest and our focus is going beyond those e-discovery tools that deduplicate and have tools that can help us maybe pre-process information, identify potentially sensitive information. You're never going to replace the human review. I always feel confident that our human review, the brain power inside of us, is always going to be a part of FOIA administration. But if we can have help from technology, of course that's for the good.
So there will always be job security in FOIA.
There will always be job security.
What we like to say, right?
Absolutely. So I guess sort of in conclusion with all of this, I was thinking about this morning, that with the ever-increasing demand by the public for FOIA, we had over 800,000 requests last year. It's going to be very interesting to see what our grand total is for the government this year. We're going to be near 1 million. It's going to be a big moment when we pass the 1 million FOIA requests threshold. But agencies are going to need to use a whole range of technologies to maximize their effectiveness in administering the FOIA. So these things that we've talked about today, making sure there's good communication, having effective case management, increasing proactive disclosures, and then utilizing IT, those are all the things I think that are keys to successful FOIA administration. Thank you. Question? Yeah, when we do best practice, repeat the question.
Thanks.
The question, thank you. The question was, are best when I was mentioning best practices workshops, are they available on YouTube? So unfortunately, no, because the space that we have held the best practices workshops in doesn't have that capability. It's something that we're exploring. Our offices are actually moving in next year, and we have much better tech, speaking of tech, in our new office space. And so we're definitely going to be exploring having those things streamed and so that they could be available on YouTube. And maybe I'll go to the table now so that Alina and I can jointly answer any questions people have.
So I know we're a little ahead of schedule. The next half an hour was going to be devoted to questions and answers. I'm sure you're all burning with desire to ask lots of questions. You're thinking of them right now. Otherwise, we'll have to start calling on people. Michael, Gary, James. But seriously, if anyone has any questions about anything we talked about today, we're happy to answer anything we can, and we also welcome comments, success stories, war stories, things that are working, things that are not working. We're happy to hear all of that. Okay, sir, thank you. Would you mind coming to the microphone? That would really be helpful. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I work for HHS, and one of the program offices is taking the proactive step to start posting grants for the agency. These grants have not been requested as of yet. They have been awarded. The grantees are concerned that the agency is so like calling them out or picking them out to post these grants, and they have concerns about that. So they have written letters in regarding do not want these grants and or amendments or attachments posted. Have you been confronted with the concerns of grantees or contractors that are doing business with the government but don't want their records to be posted?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm assuming that anything that is posted in its FOIA process form. So if there's information, which
Sure,
obviously
sure.
I know that's
Absolutely.
the assumption.
Yeah.
Anything that should be protected under the FOIA, of course, is protected.
Right.
So I think that obviously it's an agency decision ultimately as to whether you want to proactively post something before a request. But I think one thing that's really helpful maybe in addressing the concerns of a provider of information would be the fact that once there are 3 FOIA requests, by law you're going to be required to post those. And if you could show those grantees, it's very typical for you to get multiple FOIA requests for these kinds of documents. That's why you're putting them up in advance of the request, and that DOJ guidance expressly encourages agencies to put popular topics on your website before there's a request. I think both those things should go a long way to help maybe easing the anxiety of the grantees.
Right. Thank you. So we anticipate there will be a lot of FOIA requests. So we haven't received any FOIA requests for those grants, but we really anticipate there will be a significant amount when it starts trickling in. So we're taking that proactive approach.
It's great.
Do you expect the FOIA office to contact the grantee and elaborate that, or should that be done from like the secretary level to say this is why we're doing it? We include standard language in the letter as far as the PDN and things like that. But when they are concerned about saying that we don't want anything to be posted at all at this time, who should contact them? Should it be the FOIA office, or should it be another level?
I want to make sure the good thing about when you started your comment about, and you mentioned that you anticipate multiple requests. Actually, under the terms of the FOIA statute, it's when an agency either has 3 requests or anticipates 3 requests. So as soon as you said that, I was like, well, you exactly are satisfying the statutory standards. So it makes your case even stronger in terms of explaining to these grantees that this is a legal requirement by the FOIA. As to who should have the conversation with them, I really leave that up to your agency, any agency. Those kinds of things are really completely specific to the agency, so you decide internally how best to do the engagement.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Sheila, do we have any live stream questions? No. Okay,
I have a question.
Hi. What's the status of the release to one, release to all effort?
So it's the same. It's under the policy itself. The draft policy is still under review. But we, as I always say, and I mentioned earlier, we really encourage agencies to release information whenever they. To release as much information as they can proactively. And we certainly have many agencies that are already following release to one, release to all. And one of the benefits of doing it, which actually ties in a little bit with that first question, is that it eliminates the need to try to track whether you've gotten 3 requests for something. You easily satisfy the rule of 3 requirement if you just have a practice of posting all. But the challenge with it, as we all know, is the resources that are needed to code documents for posting. That's what makes it difficult for some agencies. So at this point, it's up to agencies to decide how they want to do it. But certainly some agencies are already doing it.
Thank you.
Sure. Gary.
So Gary Stern, Chief FOIA Officer for NARA, and this is really more in the form of a comment. To thank you guys, both of you, and for having the council meetings and sharing all this very helpful knowledge. From NARA's perspective, I'm happy to report we did close our top 10, or our oldest 10 FOIAs, which are the oldest 10 for the entire government.
Excellent.
And will continue to be for a period of time.
We'll have your green dot. We'll have your green dot
right.
have like extra.
But it's important, and I really want to put out kudos to the rest of the Chief FOIA Officer community, because the reason we have the 10 oldest is because they're for archival records that are classified national security information, for which we don't have the declassification authority, so we are dependent on all the other agencies who control that information to do the declassification review. And of course we know those agencies often have huge backlogs themselves, but it's therefore, for us to close our 10, we must coordinate and work with our colleagues, mostly in the intelligence and national security community. And we were helped by my connecting with Chief FOIA officers in those agencies, which we tended to, and this year we kind of waited until 3/4 of the year to start doing those communications. We closed them with 2 days to go. So my plan is to reach out to my Chief FOIA officer colleagues early in the fiscal year, like this quarter, to really request that you prioritize those ones for us, as of course I know you're doing your own and probably for others as well. But we really do appreciate all this help and coordination. And the best practices from the advisory committee are a great tool, and we're looking to those to help improve FOIA at NARA as well. So thanks.
So Gary, before you leave, speaking of that, I know that NARA undertook an effort to use the self-assessment toolkit that OIP has put out. Would you be able to share a little bit about how that's going? Have you gotten feedback?
Well, I have. So yes, that was a very timely thing. NARA, we had an OIG audit of our FOIA program last year, and we're still working on responding to their recommendations. And then we were one of many agencies that were part of the GAO audit of FOIA programs. And so in the course of both of those happening, we got the OIP's FOIA toolkit. And since we have a decentralized approach, as Alina mentioned, I have used that and requested all of our FOIA program offices within the National Archives to complete that, and then as part of my sort of FOIA oversight responsibilities, I'm using that as I do my kind of FOIA oversight program reviews of the program. So yes, that's been very helpful. So thanks.
Great, thank you. All right, any other questions? Sheila, any questions on Livestream? No. All right. Should we wrap up? Okay, we're going to let everyone go home early unless everyone is burning with desire to ask any other questions. We're available, of course, by email all the time. Please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to answer any other questions offline if you're too afraid to ask in front of everyone. And we will have another meeting at some point soon. We may have a closed meeting at some point. The technology subcommittee, I know, is going to want to meet with the council to solicit ideas and talk about the work they're doing. So just stay tuned for some updates on that. So thank you again for joining all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.